what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will, semi-emergency pod? Can we call it that? Semi-emergency. We're 2.5 days early recording a pod this week.
It's like a lukewarm emergency. It's a emergency for one very specific program, I think.
Yes. Look, we couldn't wait until Wednesday after we found out on Saturday that Tennessee was moving on from Nico Iamaleava after both parties could not reach an agreement on a renegotiated NIL deal, and that is the world we are living in. Holy cow, Will. Last time we talked, none of this had come to the surface yet. There was no sort of Pete Nakos report from On3, which then Nico's dad tried to dunk on a day later, and then a missed practice on Friday. None of this had happened yet. And so to see how quickly things went from, oh, well, you know what, the two sides are, apparently negotiating a deal, to no, this is not going to work and both sides are agreeing to move on. It's wild. And I don't want to dismiss the fact that beat writers said that it was kind of the worst kept secret during December, during this playoff run, that they were going to try and renegotiate and there could be some disagreement there. But holy cow, did this thing get ramped up to a level that I didn't think it would ever get to, and boy, did it.
And, credit to those reporters, because pretty much as badly as that playoff run could have gone for Nico Iamaleava, it did.
Don't stutter on me now. We finally got.
He's on the way out. This is like the last time I'm gonna have to say the name. Nico Iamaleava. We still got it.
Nico okay. Iamaleava.
Yes.
No. You're saying Iamaleava.
Iamaleava. Got you. Yeah. He basically credit to them because they had their position, right? It wasn't like, well, if I play really well, I might deserve a raise. It wasn't like you go to your boss and you're like, hey man, here are my metrics. I'm feeling pretty good. Maybe we should, the starting quarterback here, we're competition for the SEC. It's like, nah, man, I just went to Columbus, kind of stunk it up out there. Defense, I think, played pretty well to start the game, but we just couldn't do anything on offense. And now I'd like a raise. How's it going? So the whole athletes are growing up and you kind of can't have it both ways where they're amateurs, but they're also quote unquote growing up. This is the most non-grown up move I've ever seen. Because let's say this was, I don't know. Unfortunately, the best example is Jaden Daniels. If Jaden Daniels comes back and is just like, hey,
put a pin in that. Put a pin in that. Because we have an exact comp for this later that's going to make more sense. Okay, so we're going to get into all the different sides of this and why this situation has not just college sports fans, but it's big if even Stephen A. Smith is deciding to weigh in on it. Mm-hmm. But we have a lot of different thoughts that are going to go into that. Great pod coming up today, by the way. Do coach Manny Diaz, someone that we've been a big fan of for a long time. He is coming up. Awesome conversation with him. And then we're going to close with Lad of the Week. But before we get to the Nico discussion, quick word from our friends at Dabble, who are today's presenting sponsor. Daily Fantasy, as many of you know, that space has truly blown up. And if you're someone that's like, man, I don't have the NCAA tournament to be able to watch anymore. College football is still how many days away? Over 100. If we're in triple digits, that's a long time in my book. But daily fantasy is one of those ways in which you can be, just spending your time watching MLB, watching NBA playoffs, whatever it may be. And Dabble is the best place to do it. It is one of the newest and best apps in the DFS space, and they've wasted no time making a name for themselves. Dabble's social function is second to none, and they offer a wide variety of sports for making picks, including, as I said, NBA playoffs, MLB. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that's promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. Okay, well, sorry for cutting you off there. I'm still stunned this actually happened, man. Some might say the lack of guardrails from the NCAA made this inevitable, made a situation like this inevitable. And Tennessee makes the difficult decision, I'm sure it was a difficult decision, to move on from Nico, tell him, nah, we don't think you're worth the $4 million that you're seeking. And it's a pivotal moment for college athletics as a whole.
It's like that meme with the dominoes falling where you see a picture of Bo Nix with the Milo's tea, and it's like, wow, kids are getting paid. And then it's several years later, Nico Iamaleava is asking for $4 million. How did we get here?
Look, everybody wants to talk about unintended consequences. I think that there is definitely something to take away from this, in that there's a line. There is a line. It's pivotal in the same way that when Tennessee went to court against the NCAA over its recruitment of Nico by saying, hey, NCAA, you don't have outlined NIL rules, and the courts ruled in favor of Tennessee. No, the pendulum has swung totally in the opposite direction of that.
Good news, Tennessee. You were right. Bad news, Tennessee. You were right.
I don't know who's writing the Nico book one day.
Is it a coffee table book?
It's not quite a coffee table book. I love a good coffee table book. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Just going through a bunch of photos, something like that. It's got one of those covers that's always flapping open. You know what I'm talking about. It's hardcover, but it's got like the whimsy cover on front, matted a little bit. But the fact that those 2 chapters would be part of the Nico story is still so hard to process. And there ended up being a price for Nico that Tennessee said, this is what it is, and we're not willing to go above it. Tennessee basically said, Carson Beck money? Mm-mm. Miami might have given him that. We're not giving you that. And Nico missing practice on Friday and being unreachable, according to several reports, was the last straw for Josh Heupel. It's wild in so many different ways because the free market giveth and the free market taketh away.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk all we want about this is what guys are capable of doing in the free market. And also the flip side is that teams are also capable of saying no, of saying we value our roster and the pieces around it. And we think we're going to need probably more capital to spend elsewhere. And we don't want to just write you a blank check. We don't think that you are worth it at this point.
Really quick, let me come back around actually to finish the point I was making earlier, which was that, this is not a super well-known or unfortunately likable player. So the reason I was starting to talk about, like a Jaden Daniels or like what Josh Allen is doing in Buffalo, for instance, there are quarterbacks who we realize are carrying their offense and that we feel like they deserve to be rewarded for that. Even in college, it wouldn't be the biggest deal if like Bryce Young came out after his Heisman season and got 5 6.
You're hitting the point that I told you.
I'm sorry. But if like a big name quarterback, we're on the same page. It's the same point, right? Like, but if a quarterback comes out and got that money, we would be on his side, right? But in this case, it's so funny. It's such a great test because I don't know who his allies are in this case.
Well, Lane Kiffin told the world, why doesn't Bryce Young do this after the 2021 season? He's coming off a Heisman Trophy season. It's pre-draft. Bama would have obviously gone to the ends of the earth to be able to make him that money. Nico wasn't that. Nico was not in a position where he would have had that type of leverage, but I still would have pushed back on the logic of Bryce Young doing that because you're still trying to win over a locker room. And quarterbacks are held to a different standard than a starting corner or even someone like Jordan Addison, who was coming off of the Biletnikoff season that he had, and then he hits the portal because he doesn't like the circumstances around him. He's able to do that and not necessarily hurt his draft stock because he was doing what ultimately he thought was best for himself, and it kind of turned out to be the case by going to USC. So, look, I think 2 things can be true at the same time with this. I applaud Tennessee. I really do. They decided that there wasn't enough there to give him what would have been a significant raise from the $2.4 million. That's a significant raise, Jimmy Sexton. And while I like Nico as a long-term, what do you think you're going to get from him type of player, the type of guy that will, if this is 2005 or 2006, a lot of people sipping the Nico Kool-Aid going, this is great for Tennessee. This is working out really well. What an awesome agreement. They're going to have one of the better quarterback situations moving forward because let's not forget, Nico still has 3 years of eligibility left. Okay. Like there is still a whole lot to like with a guy that's figuring out who he is as a player. But of course, the NIL expedited this entire process of his career and maybe for the worse. Who knows if it's going to end up being more of a cautionary tale, and it's not going to be in the same ilk as Jaden Rashada because Nico actually went out there and played an entire season and did so for a playoff team. So it's not necessarily like that. But one of the pitfalls of this era could be a situation like this that would have played out so differently if this happened a decade ago, 2 decades ago, and the conversations surrounding him. Josh Heupel very clearly, we talked about this so many times last year, but it's worth remembering today. Josh Heupel did not trust him to attack downfield.
Yep.
Simple as that. We said all year that it was evident, and the numbers backed it up. Only 14.9% of his pass attempts went for 20 yards. Again, that's just 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. That was 12th in the SEC. Okay? He had a 38% adjusted completion percentage on those 20-yard throws, also 12th in the SEC. that accounts for, drops and takes away throwaways and stuff like that. So in other words, downfield, it just didn't really line up for him. And while you can blame some of the stuff on Tennessee receivers for that, let's not sit here and pretend like Squirrel White and Dante Thornton were just third stringers. Okay. They were guys who had shown in the past that they could be valuable downfield targets.
And I think that's a great point to make too, though, because it's also the passing offense under Nico. It's not just Nico. It's the point of if you spend X amount of money on Nico, you don't have that money on receivers. And so it's the same thing. It's like, hey, we could talk about, oh, Nico has the arm strength. Why aren't they trusting him? It's because they don't trust his combination with the play call, with the receivers, and therefore they're not getting the value add that they're expecting.
We very quickly realized Dylan Sampson is the face of this offense. And this defense is great.
Mm-hmm.
It's loaded. And they decided that's our winning combination to just get to the playoff is Dylan Sampson and a lights out defense. And Josh Heupel redid the entire way he constructs an offense because he recognized his personnel. And I give him great credit for that because if he had just tried to put what is it again? Round hole, square peg, you know the phrase. If he had tried to do that and just dug his cleats in, this offense would have held them back, and they would not have made it to the college football playoff. Now, they barely got there, and obviously we know what happened once they got there. They lost to an eventual national champion Ohio State team, a game that was over in the first 5 minutes. But it is still weird, as you bring up, that even though this was a 5-star quarterback that you broke the bank to sign, for one reason or another, you basically turned him into Greg McElroy.
Yeah.
Fair or not?
Yeah.
Other metrics that did not work.
But also, Greg McElroy knew he was Greg McElroy. And I think that makes him a little bit better, actually. Good point.
Yes. Yeah, he did. And that's not to say that Nico's career will turn out exactly the same. That was the role that he was asked to operate based on the limitations that we saw play out.
Mm-hmm.
The other metrics that aren't particularly good, and whoever is going to sign on for the Nico experience is going to have to be well aware of this. Under pressure, it was ugly. In those spots in which he was under pressure, PFF had him for 4.9 yards per pass attempt with a 52% adjusted completion percentage. That's not good. If your yards per attempt are super low, your adjusted completion percentage better be at like 75, 80%. Not great.
If you're in a 1 or 2 read offense with an offensive line great enough to do what they did with Dylan Sampson that had just had Hendon Hooker look awesome in it, it's actually kind of worse than the numbers say, too. Yeah.
Yeah. And even Joe Milton still looked all right doing some of those things. This is the most damning thing for the pro Nico crowd. And it was a point that I probably should have hit on more when I decided I don't think he's one of the 5 best returning quarterbacks in the SEC. Well, there were 27 SEC quarterbacks that had at least one, as PFF defines it, big time throw under pressure. Nico Iamaleava was not one of those 27 SEC quarterbacks. His backup, Gaston Moore, had 2 big-time throws under pressure. 14 teams in the SEC and 27 SEC quarterbacks had at least one big-time throw under pressure. You can go and do the chart under the premium stats in PFF, and you'll scroll all the way to the bottom. You'll be like, oh, my God, Nico had 0. And all of the guys that are surrounding him at 0 in that category are guys that played 15 snaps or something like that. Not the guy that was the starting quarterback throughout the entire season.
Yeah.
That's baffling. And that's not good.
In a vertical offense, too. That's again.
Yes.
Say what you will about Joe Milton. He was slinging that thing. And on top of that, again, we could talk about how the blocking scheme can be a little bit complex at Tennessee. But outside of having a free rusher running at you, you really just don't have that many opportunities to be under pressure because the offense is so quick and vertical. It's not like you're sitting there holding the ball, going through a 4 or 5 progression, you know? If
you're wondering why it seems like a lot of people are kind of bashing on Nico the player right now, it's because of stuff like that. Okay, and I know there's a lot of that going around. If this guy is middle of the pack, he's mediocre. Maybe some of it could potentially go too far. But there were a lot of Tennessee fans going, look, he's one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. We have one of the top 10 guys. And I'm like, I don't think he's going to be in that camp. I just don't. That's not the type of guy that you break the bank for. This isn't DJ Lagway. I hate to say it. It's not. And from Iamaleava's side,
DJ, like, I feel like I could see him making 12 big time throws under pressure. That guy is one big time throw under pressure.
Yes, a walking big time throw under pressure.
Yeah.
For Nico, I can guarantee you the thought process and what went on with his team, which obviously includes his dad, if he's coming out and trying to dunk on reporters for accurately reporting what's going on. You could probably see where their head was at throughout this process of, look, this guy as a redshirt freshman just led Tennessee to its first playoff berth ever, and maybe he wasn't even fully healthy throughout the latter half of the season. But clearly, Nico's team misread this situation. I don't want to put it all on Nico because we know that there are adults behind the scenes that are clearly pushing their motives as well. So this isn't 100% the decision of a college kid. But I think he's going to regret this for the rest of his life. I really do. I really, really do. Cole talked about this last year with the Quinshon Judkins move. And some might have kind of like brushed it aside as like 20th century logic. And look, we're adapt or die guys who have embraced a lot of the elements that have come with this and said, this is the world that we're living in now. It's up to us to kind of adjust our expectations. But at a certain point, Will, there has to be some incentive with staying in the same place and getting taken care of for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at where retired football players end up, and if you really want to get a little bit morbid with it, you could look at where retired football players die. So many raise their families in their college towns because chances are during the 3, 4, 5 years, we got 6 year, 7-year guys now. Chances are they made some pretty good connections there.
Mm-hmm.
And Tennessee, even if Nico didn't end up being Peyton Manning 2.0, Tennessee fans would have claimed that guy. They went to bat for that dude. And instead, he ends up hitting the portal in what could have been his pre-draft season. I don't think he was going to the NFL. I'll agree with our guy Trey Wallace on that. But that's the part that's sad to me. That's a bummer. That's a no-win scenario for all parties involved right now. And we'll wait and see if the team that ends up getting Nico ends up winning out of this situation. We'll see. But right now, this is a cautionary tale, and it's a bummer. It's a bummer because this didn't have to play out this way.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's that kind of dichotomy of, do you want to be a kid or do you want to be an adult, right? If you're going to carry yourself like a business, like Jay-Z said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a business comic man. Same deal here, right? Where it's like, I am the offense, I am the business, come invest in me or don't, and I'm going to take my talents out of here. Well, then I got to judge you like an adult. The things that I said about Nico, the things that we said about Nico, and here pretty roundly positive. And I think what we often said was, trust yourself more, take more deep shots, open up the offense. And for Josh Heupel's standpoint, give this kid more attempts so he can get more comfortable. Now, we were both fine with him getting paid on the way in. That's the thing, I believe, right? It was just sign of the times, but I think we both pretty roundly said this is a pretty good investment for Tennessee. It shores up their quarterback position for the future. Well, the issue is now the positive sentiment that we had, which was like, hey, this kid has a couple more years in the system. He's going to grow up. He's just a first-time starter. We only saw him in that bowl game against Iowa. You're young. You have so much ahead of you. Now you've declared business is open. I'm going to go, let's call it an IPO. It's the same deal. It's like, well, now I have enough to go stand on my own. I have enough to have other people invest in me. And for whatever team, to your point, that takes on that investment, you're not getting these 4th and 5th year players that we've seen. And like going down the transfer portal like rankings and stuff, we were just talking about this, like look at Carson Beck, look at Mateer, these guys that have been around for years. And I mean, maybe not the best like time to shoehorn this, but again, the like transfer portal rankings are such a sham, the way that he shoots up to the top past all those guys, because you hit on it a little bit earlier, he's the only one available right now. So all the clicks are going to him, all the eyes are going to him, and it just puts him up on this pedestal that I want to feel bad for him in the same way that I felt bad for Bryce Underwood. And I talked about that on the pod where I said, you got the weight of your family, you got the weight of the world on your shoulders. But with Nico, it's like you already did that step. You already got paid, and now you want more. And I'm just so interested, and I'm starting to kind of feel, to your point, I think you got bad advice because everybody wants to be Jalen Hurts, okay? Everybody wants to have 2 homes. Everybody wants to say, okay, well, I'll get out of here. It'll be great. It'll be amicable. These fans will still cheer for me. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. It made Tennessee fans look kind of silly because Tennessee fans were going to bat for this guy. They were the ones, showing the video of Heupel saying he, took off the gas against Oklahoma to be respectful. They were trying to really gas this guy up and get a positive environment for him going. And Tennessee fans are some of the most skeptical, can be, some of the more mercurial fans, and they stuck their necks out for this kid. And I feel like it's not working out for him.
What are they supposed to do?
Yeah,
I'll go to bat for Tennessee fans.
Same.
What are Tennessee fans supposed to do when you know what it took to get this guy? You want that guy to be the guy.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to defend him against everybody that ranks Diego Pavia ahead of him, like I did. Of course, you're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the guy that you've invested so much emotional energy into.
Hopium.
There's so much of that.
Yeah.
I'll say that. Look, I won't hate on Tennessee fans for the way that this played out.
Not at all. I feel bad for them. That's what I'm saying, because they really were out there pushing the propaganda that, he was going to turn into Peyton Manning. He was going to turn into this guy. And it's like, I really do feel bad because they paid the money. They didn't get the worth. And now it's like, in a way, they have egg on their face. But to your point, I think they made the right decision, because the wrong decision would have been paying that amount of money for a guy that can't do it. And then you're really in trouble.
If we had found out Tennessee agreed to this $4 million price point, I think we would have done two things. I think we would have both applauded Tennessee's sense of urgency and also questioned his worth.
Yep.
I think that still would have been there, right? But this might be an unpopular take, Will. My hunch on Iamaleava is that he and his team are under the impression that he's not going to the NFL next year and that he might not be one of these future first-round guys.
Mm-hmm.
They made this move because they don't think he's that guy, and they're trying to get whatever they possibly can at this level. If they're thinking to themselves, guys, in a few short weeks, we're going to see this guy popping up all over the way too early mock drafts for 2026, and he's got a massive payday coming. He's going to be a set-it-and-forget-it first-round guy. We feel really good about this. I don't think they're making these types of moves behind the scenes. I don't.
I think it's hard to, because if you think about the logic of how they got here, I think it's almost a blind belief in your guy. And I think that you can't really segment that. You can't, with a straight face, ask for that amount of money while also in the back of your mind going, I don't think my guy's really worth this. I think it's self-gaslighting, but I think they do believe he is worth this.
Remember this, though. In the same state, Will Levis, second-round pick. He's going to be entering year 3. The expectation is the Titans are going to move on from him, end up drafting Cam Ward. We'll wait and see kind of how that all plays out. He was the first pick of the second round. So trying not a first-round quarterback. He didn't even make $3 million with his annual average salary on that rookie deal. With the money that Nico is making, you need to be a first-round guy to get a raise.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why perhaps they're looking at this going, we got to get this money now, or else he is the old joke. This guy got a pay cut when he went to the NFL.
Yeah.
People said that about Miami players forever. People say that about Georgia players forever, whoever. If you think you're destined for first-round status, why have this holdout to renegotiate for 1 year?
There has to be an element of hypo here, like in terms of their lack of trust in the system. Because if you believe that this coach can get you to that first-round grade, I don't think you ask for that. So I think that element of it might be, maybe they think, hey, I can get this first-round grade, but not here,
I don't even know if that's going to be the case either. I really don't. And I don't think they're going to get the money they seek.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be stunned if he ends up getting Carson Beck money in the post-spring window, because teams have already invested in their quarterbacks.
Yeah.
That gets taken care of post-regular season.
And it's the first thing you do, because you want to get people who fit that system and you want to use that to lure in receivers.
Exactly. And coaches use it with their recruiting classes as well, with trying to make sure that you've got your blue-chip quarterback signed and then all the pieces fall in place afterwards. That's why if you look at these lists, look at these lists of the top quarterbacks for 2026 and then see how many of the top 50 quarterbacks are still uncommitted going into their senior year of high school. It's so minimal, because you try and get this stuff taken care of early and then build around that. And Tennessee did not get this taken care of in the midst of a playoff push. Other teams did. Josh Pate, by the way, reported that Tennessee players were apparently trying to renegotiate before the playoff, saying, hey, this isn't what we agreed to. We agreed to play 12 games. This is extra. And if that's legitimate, if that's anything more, even if that's not really what those players felt in their heart was part of their contract, if that's even brought to the surface of you need to pay me extra to play in a playoff game,
you're structurally planning on being a loser.
That's when I'll finally push back and do the boomer take of what are we doing? What in the world are we doing? That lunacy just is such backwards thinking. But clearly, this disconnect has been there. It's clearly there. And if you're a Tennessee fan hoping, we'll poach some elite group of 5-starter, those guys like Darian Mensah, a guy that we're going to talk about with Manny Diaz, they've already been taken care of too. We've got Iowa out here poaching the best FCS quarterbacks. All right.
Hey, Connor, I have a trivia question for you. I don't know if you looked this up, but okay. According to the portal rankings on 24/7 Sports, okay, of course, Iamaleava is at the top. He's the best quarterback transfer we've ever seen in history. He's a 99.99 guy at the very, very top.
Caleb Williams might beg to differ, but that's okay. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Just that's this guy's cycle, I guess. Right. So, okay. The next guy down who is uncommitted is number 17. It's the funniest name I could give you. One guess.
It's Cam Rising.
Jaden Rashada. So there's your drop off. So that's why he's in a way valuable, but in the other way, those are all teams that I'm seeing logos that are out of the market.
Speaking of the market, if you transfer within the SEC in the post-spring window, you got to sit a year. So remember that Nico's market is not an SEC market at all. So it's not like he's going to have some long list of SEC suitors, and that's a two-way street as well, which we'll get to in a second here. I'd be surprised if he fits the description of Big Ten quarterback. And I would point to, we defended Nico's performance in the playoff game because of the pieces. It seemed like every offensive weapon around him was hurt that day, and he had to run it, 20 times in that game or something like that. I defend Nico, who obviously did not have the best showing that he could have in that game, had some nice moments, but I don't think that people would look at his profile of his game and go, that's a guy that we're going to be able to line up, in a Big Ten game in mid-November and feel particularly good about. So I don't want to totally dismiss that, but I'm just not saying that's not going to be the ideal market. And even if you're a team like Oregon, who reportedly was the team that Nico's team reached out to, and then it was Dan Lanning. I'm blanking on who reported this, so apologies. I don't mean to just steal information like so many people do in this business, but it was Dan Lanning who reached out to Josh Heupel and said, your boy's sniffing around, and tipped him off. And even if you're in Oregon's position, you've already invested a lot into Dante Moore, who was in Nico's recruiting class. Those guys were right next to each other as 5-star quarterbacks in 2023. But Dante Moore, he's not obviously as proven as Nico, but he's got a year up on him in the system. And obviously they've taken care of him. They have made sure that guy, as decorated as he was, somebody that played as a true freshman at UCLA, is not just, some bargain quarterback. They got him and Dylan Gabriel at the same exact time, with the expectation that he's going to sit for a year, and then it's going to be his time when Dylan Gabriel is ultimately moving on to the NFL. So if you're the Iamaleava team,
wow, look at us.
I butchered
We're
it.
off the racket now. It's done.
I got a little overconfident on that one. You're thinking, oh well, our guy's got more experience, and he was in the same recruiting class. Why wouldn't they want him? Well, because quarterbacks mean a lot to programs, and you value what you've put into them, what they've done in the scheme. And it's not just as simple of, oh, well, you line these guys up blank. Who would you rather have? There are so many more factors that go into that. And I just think that's what his team has overlooked. And we talk about this a lot, and I hate to beat a dead horse because I say it every single time this part of the calendar rolls around. Set the bar low for the post-spring quarterback transfers. You have to. It's just so hard to step in and be on the same page as those receivers, have coaches figure out what you do best, get the full use of the playbook. Even Joe Burrow took his lumps as a post-spring transfer in that 2018 season. This stuff takes time. That brings us back to Tennessee's future.
And really quick, I do want to say there, I mean, we all remember a time as SEC fans where our team legitimately just said, I don't know what we're doing at quarterback this year, actually. We're just going to show up, genuinely. We're just going to show up. We got a couple of guys we kind of like. We haven't really seen the separation in practice. We're going to play a guy series here. I mean, we talked about Kiffin doing this with Hurts, back in the day. Yeah, this is not that far. Alabama did this as a good team. This is not that far removed. Now it's to the point where this stuff, I mean, great point about Oregon, because that goes to show, guys, that's why Oregon's not taking all of our recruits elsewhere, because they're paying dead money for a quarterback who sit on their bench and just sunk cost. So they have a backup and they have a guy next year because they don't want to get caught flat-footed with no quarterback. Because now with the transfer portal, you have FCS teams that can move up. You have guys that can move linearly. So if you just do not have a guy, you are so free-falling in modern college football, especially if you don't have a guy to start the season. You look like a PR disaster, and maybe a guy shows up. Maybe a guy is the old school, hero who rides in and saves your team, but then he asks for an extension the next year and you're in danger of losing him. So you need continuity at the quarterback position, just like the NFL. And you're right, it's the only position like that in college sports, period, because who are you bringing to media day? Who are you hanging your hat on? Who are you selling tickets around? You could put these guys in your marketing material now. So yeah, I think this is such a weird situation that we're finally seeing come out, and it's so much deeper than just who's starting at quarterback. It's that we all remember a time not too long ago where we didn't know that and it was okay, and now it's just so not.
And what's hard too, to that point, is recruiting around that guy when everybody knows he's the man. Go ask Florida what it's like to try and get guys that want to back up DJ Lagway. Go ask Tennessee. That was a big question last year. What if Nico gets hurt? Gaston Moore? You trust him? Hey, look, there is very minimal experience behind Nico at quarterback. 9 career pass attempts. That's it. So let's talk about that, because the other thing that can be true with all of this, well, I applaud Tennessee for putting its foot down and saying, nope, we're not willing to spend that much on a guy that's a middle of the pack quarterback that's not going to necessarily take us to a national championship with this roster. The other thing that can be true, True Serum Josh Heupel would probably tell you that Iamaleava's replacement is going to be a downgrade, at least in 2025. Heupel said after Saturday's spring game, which who paid attention to that? Let me tell you, Trey Wallace is like, this is the only time I've ever been to a game, and I could not tell you what in the world happened. No idea what was going on. I think it ended in a 14-14 tie, something like that.
It's like the most elaborate coach distraction ever. They're gonna dap it up after this. Josh Heupel's like, "Good job, boys. Nobody cared about our spring game."
Trey went up to somebody before the game. I was like, "What are your expectations for today out of the quarterbacks?" I think, and somebody said, "Yeah, I can't wait to see what Nico does with these receivers."
Buddy, I got the meme where the guy's hands on the shoulder. I got bad news. He's not coming out.
When that fella gets internet, he's in for quite a surprise. Let's just say that. So that's kind of the thing that is weird to process, because it's not like they have some guy waiting in the wings. And maybe that's why Nico thought he had real legitimate leverage. But look, they're going to pursue a quarterback in the post-spring window. Heupel came out and said as much. No disrespect to Jake Merklinger, who has a prime opportunity now. Prime opportunity. After last year, he's the third-string quarterback. And even if Heupel believes that guy is my quarterback of the future, the odds are they're going to add someone that's going to compete with him, and as well as true freshman George McIntyre. Set the bar very low for who Tennessee's going to be able to poach. And maybe,
but also maybe not. And I'm sorry, I'm not disagreeing with you. I want to make that clear. But here's the thing about Josh Heupel. I would have told you until Joe Milton showed up, there's a quarterback-proof guy. I watched this guy shred my team with, who's the guy? DJ Mack that went to Old Dominion after that. It was Basura. Like, that's the other thing about Tennessee, is there is a chance. I'm not even selling hopium here. I was more shocked at Milton and Iamaleava not living up to it than the revolving door of random guys he had at UCF. So in my mind, maybe you just get a guy who does exactly what Josh Heupel wants and doesn't try to be a 5-star. Josh Heupel goes kind of like a la old school Nick Saban, where it's like, just give me a guy who actually doesn't lose the game and does it like, yeah, he's not hitting Hooker, but he knows he's Greg McElroy. Maybe the offense comes out there awesome and they just run the ball again. I don't know.
A little bit different at UCF, the competition they were facing at the time that Heupel was there.
Oh, yeah.
Not into the Big 12 yet, not facing the same sort of defenses. A little bit tougher to just say.
No, I'm saying the bowl game against LSU, back when bowl games still kind of mattered, where like LSU had some dudes on defense and DJ Mack was out there slinging it against them. And so, it's a quick read offense. And when you get film on a guy, it gets a little bit harder. And it gets a little bit harder to run the offense, which is why sometimes they come out like gangbusters to start a season, and guys start to see the film. But yeah, maybe it ends up in a way where it's like, I mean, we just saw this situation a little bit at Oklahoma where it's like, just give us something, right? It's like the 5-star getting working out. So it actually really would not, I just want to get that on the board. It wouldn't be that shocking to me because it felt like they were trying to be two different teams at the same time last year. Maybe just everyone being on the same page de facto makes them a little bit better if their defense doesn't get significantly worse. Because that's the real story of this team is how good their defense was.
I'm still setting the bar low.
I know. I'm trying to be nice, but I think how about this? Of any team in the SEC, I think Heupel's system is the most quarterback independent. How about that?
What if I told you that the last two offenses didn't average better than 25 points per game against SEC competition?
You're so right, man. And they both feel so weird though. Like that's now we'll kind of know. You know, at the end of the day, because if you got to do something, it's different than you want to do something. I feel like they wanted to do something the last 2 years. They got to do it now.
I don't know who they're going to poach. I don't know who they're going to poach, what that market's going to look like. But Heupel's this move says we're not going to overpay for a quarterback.
Yeah.
And we're not going to overpay for a quarterback that had 2 years in the system already. Tamper all you want, but it wouldn't make sense to tamper for someone, pay them big bucks, and then hope a post-spring version of that quarterback is better than Nico.
Mm-hmm.
That market is tough. It's really tough. The good news for Heupel is that he can kind of afford to gamble in year 5. His job is not in jeopardy. He's coming off the best 3-year stretch that Tennessee's had in 2 decades. You should feel, as an elite offensive mind, maybe I could take some of those chances. And maybe that's going to get into what you're talking about of taking a guy that's just been very overlooked in this process. The challenge is you're trying to figure out a guy that's overlooked right now. And there aren't a whole lot of those going around where you could really be confident this guy's overlooked. We know we could just offer him $1.5 million, tell him he's QB1 for this year, and feel like we're going to have, one of the top 20, 30 offenses in FBS. I don't know that player exists right now. Maybe it does, but it's a lot harder to find them. And I don't want to assume that's going to be the case because this offense is harder than people would think. It is a little bit harder than people probably give it credit for because of the tempo. And it's not a system that's just, it takes 2 seconds to figure this out. You can talk about being one to read, but it still takes a lot to process that and to be someone that, you're not huddling. You're not sitting there having a coach just constantly in your ear, during these huddles where you've got, the 30 seconds to be able to figure out where your reads are and what you got to get it and go. And there's a reason why Nico didn't start as a true freshman and why Joe Milton was the bridge the gap quarterback, like that's something that I keep coming back to. So if Josh Heupel decides, let's get creative, let's get weird. I've got a bananas possibility that I don't think will actually happen, but I would be so here for it if it did. Are you ready for it?
Yes.
What if Austin Mack realizes that he's the odd man out of the Alabama quarterback room?
Okay.
That's part of
type.
it.
He's tall.
Tennessee recruits him knowing that he can't play this year. Because again, transfer within the SEC in the post-spring window, you cannot play this year. You got to sit out a year. But Heupel's pitch is reset, learn the system, come in here, learn the system, and then entering 2026, you're the guy that's been in college the longest. And you're going to have 3 years of working with DeBoer, Grubb, and Heupel. And year 4, you can step in and kind of be the guy. And you still got multiple years of eligibility left. And all of a sudden, you're in a really good situation and a really quarterback-friendly offense once you're able to get these concepts down. Austin Mack, is 18 years old. He's 18.
The ages of anyone anyone in the world surprises me at this point in sports. That's insane. I feel like I've been hearing about this kid since he was, 15 then.
He's entering year 3 of college, and he's 18 years old. He's going to be 19 in June, for the record.
Okay.
But he's, again, tall, 6'6". We know Josh Heupel likes him a 6'6" quarterback. Maybe some Joe Milton type vibes to that. And if you're Austin Mack, maybe you realize that Keelan Russell is already ahead of you for QB2. And maybe you realize if I stick around here, I'm going to waste a year of eligibility as a third-string guy. And what's the point of that? So maybe in your mind, you're making the play for 2026, and you just make the decision to move on. Okay, so that's part of this wild scenario. That doesn't help you for 2025 if you're Tennessee.
But that also gives you so much hopium, though, because that's the thing about Austin Mack. We should just pass him around like the human victory cigar or whatever, where you got this huge guy who's the backup. You got to be scared of him when he's showing up. That actually buys you some time, if nothing else.
Kind of what Joe Milton was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so 2025, what would Tennessee do? Hit up Cam Rising. I have no idea what in the world Cam Rising is up to.
It's like Uncle Rico. He's just throwing footballs like in a backyard, hitting a tire somewhere. His flip phone rings. He's like, hello?
Uncle Rico, Gary from White Lotus. Did I just blow your mind? Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. Think on that one. I don't know if he's living in an RV somewhere. I think I'm just picturing Gardner Minshew, similar vibes. A post-spring transfer that actually worked out. Gardner Minshew, instead of being a third-string quarterback at Alabama, Mike Leach says, come lead the nation in passing. We know what happens at Washington State. Mike Leach is wearing a fake mustache by the end of the season. If you have any sort of belief whatsoever that Cam Rising still has anything going, you do a behind-the-scenes physical, see if he's got 2 knees in place. I don't know if he does. But I do know he's got a year of eligibility left after Utah announced it was moving on from him. They made the decision, we're not going to do this again. You've had 2 consecutive years where you've just been unavailable for us. And I know that the injury risk would be totally baked into this, but dude doesn't have any leverage whatsoever. I don't even think he's officially in the portal. He isn't in the portal. He's not training for the NFL draft. For all I know, he's a dental hygienist somewhere in the middle of Provo, Utah.
He's got all the leverage in the world, which is that he might just be on to his new life. He might just be settled down. He might have already picked a house. He might actually be like, actually, I'm good out here.
And by the way, I know Provo is home to BYU, not Utah. I know the state of Utah, so I'm saying like maybe he went into enemy territory, and maybe that's why he's been, kind of MIA for the past few months here. Cam Rising is going to be 26 years old next month, Will. 26.
I was about to say, so your plan here is a 26. Guy who's been here for 3 years but is 18, and another gentleman who is 26 years. These are actually, I think they're different generations. I'm not even kidding. I think Cam Rising is actually a millennial because that's about Brady's age, and I actually think the next guy is Gen Z.
Cam Rising was born in 1999.
Yep, he's a millennial. This is a generational difference in quarterbacks.
If you just want to if you get really creative, that's the most creative plan that I can come up with. That would be really intriguing for this year. And the risk is low with Cam Rising. If he gets hurt, all right, you're in the same exact spot. What are you going to end up having to pay a guy that right now is not being talked about with the NFL draft because he didn't declare for the NFL draft? He's not in the transfer portal. Get that guy 2 months to be able to work out and let Cam Rising figure it out. Now, the conditioning aspect would be a little bit rough.
He's probably so good at pickleball, dude. He's probably been a fiend of the pickleball courts.
For all you know, though, like you're going to show up to some bunker somewhere, and for all you know, Cam Rising's just been doing sit-ups and throwing the ball over those mountains over there, and he's been doing that for the last 5 months, just waiting on somebody to give him a call. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't think it will. And Tennessee fans, don't hit unsubscribe. Please don't do that. We're just having fun here. But something like that, could that be more intriguing than trying to poach a second stringer from somebody and hope that it works out with very limited time to be able to grasp the concepts of that system? I don't know. It's a downgrade probably no matter what, but you can at least bridge the gap to whatever waits next year. Maybe that's Austin Mack, or maybe that's Merklinger or McIntyre, or the prize 2026 quarterback commit, Faison Brandon, who's considered the number 1 recruit in 27 sports rankings. I think he's like 4th in composite rankings. But whatever you need to do this year.
From one to another. Look at this. The 24/7 sports rankings are their best friend.
Tennessee's not going to be all about winning the breakup.
Yeah.
It's all about winning the breakup. Whoever replaces Nico is going to be loved by that fan base. We always say with coaching, don't be the guy that replaces the guy. This is an instance in which it probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to be the guy to replace the guy because of how the guy left. You know? And that whoever Nico's successor is not going to be held to the typical Heupel standard, which, by the way, has not produced a scoring offense worse than 35th in the country during his 7 seasons as a head coach. It's a very high floor from that standpoint, but I brought up before the fact that the last 2 Heupel offenses, not better than 25 points per game in SEC play. That's tough post-Hendon Hooker era. That is tough. So the offensive floor might be a touch lower than what some of the raw numbers might indicate, but Iamaleava might have led a floor offense at Tennessee this year. And Tennessee might have looked up and gone, why are we paying $4 million to have the number 9 offense in the SEC? What's the point of that? All the new pieces they have in place, by the way, a lot of new receivers there. They're going to figure out what this running back hierarchy looks like now in a post-Dylan Sampson world. But look, maybe the takeaway for many is just going to be simply, this could have all been avoided if athletes just had contracts like true employees. I get that, but holdouts still exist in the NFL too, man. They do.
Trust me, bro. Just a little bit more player empowerment, bro. Please, just a little bit more player empowerment, and then everything will be fine, bro. Then we'll figure it out. Yeah. I mean, I'd say it like this. I think they get 3 avenues, right? And I think you actually kind of addressed 2 of them, right? This is a weird system. This is a system that exists pretty much solely in Josh Heupel's mind. There are versions of it. He's technically off of the Leach tree, but this is not a Leach system. And we talked about the Wazoo thing is even a little bit different. I mean, honestly, if Mateer were available, that would be about as close as a 1-to-1 as you could get. Oh no, they waited too long.
It's more Bryles, Levy type. And I'm not saying that Heupel got it from Levy. I realize the chain of command there, but I'd say it's got more Bryles principles to it.
Yeah, and the different obviously is a little bit of that, like the way they do their run game, right? And so you still got a little bit of the air raid concepts in there. But point being, he at least had the experience doing that. But you kind of have 3 archetypes of guy, right? You have a guy who knows a system like this, which means that we're going to see a guy, if we go that direction, from the freakiest place you've seen. Like, to your point, some FCS school that you've never heard of.
Incarnate Word
is out there running. So that's exactly what I was thinking, Connor. Some random school that you're like, oh, I guess I have heard of them. Oh, they have an NCAA record for this. And you're going to get this guy go, okay, he knows the system. You're going to get a guy who can learn the system and basically set a year or 2 of his career on fire. You talked about that with Mac, right? Okay, I don't know the system, but I'm willing to wait. But the offense suffers in the meantime. And then you have a guy who is going to show up and not really care about the system because he has all the leverage. So I think you've exactly hit on 2 of the 3 options, which is a guy who is down to wait and learn the system, which Nico didn't totally do yet. That's the thing. This version of Nico hopefully was going to be the one that learned the system. We were told that was going to be the one in 2024. We didn't see it, right? So a guy who maybe has already crashed out somewhere, who has the time to wait, who trusts Josh Heupel, has a personal connection to him and believes in him, right? But then, the other option is just get a guy in, which to a degree, Hendon Hooker was this, a guy who was already pretty developed. It was just like, you need me, I need you, let's have a partnership. And I think the difference
Hooker was Pruitt too. Don't forget that. Pruitt recruit that stayed on when Heupel came on board.
Yep, exactly. So you have like the player leverage version where they just they already have their game. You have the school leverage version where you get a guy from somewhere random. And then you have kind of somewhere in the middle where they both decide to work together. And again, that's the one that hasn't really worked out because like Milton decided to work together with Josh Heupel. Nico decided to work together and wait and try to learn it. So yeah, I think they go in another direction for sure.
The last Tennessee starting quarterback who started and finished his career in Knoxville, Josh Dobbs.
What a king. I mean, aging like fine wine, that Josh Dobbs tenure in Tennessee.
Right? We'll get Josh on the show eventually. Unreturned text on that one. Should I admit that on air? I don't care.
He's a pretty busy guy, I think.
Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't take that one personally.
Yeah, we'll get Josh on the show eventually. But yeah, it's a bummer in so many ways, though, because you spent so much time as a Tennessee fan hoping this was going to be the guy to get us to a national championship. And you're starting over. As much as you might feel vindicated if he goes to this school and doesn't end up being anything, like he believes he is by demanding a price like that, you might get a small victory in that. But when this guy signed up to be your guy, and he's rocking the Gucci sunglasses, that's the guy. That's the volleyball player. Did you know he played volleyball? Have we gone too long talking about Nico without mentioning that? You sold yourself on this being the guy that was going to take you to different places you haven't been in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. The end zone.
Let's
a
not
foreign
overlook.
destination to him. He's applying for his passport. Customs got tied up with him.
We will not disrespect the legend Hendon Hooker like
Dylan
that.
Simpson's got a residence there. That's his primary residence. He's like, look, I gotta have a roommate in the end zone. You're like,
just a jab right to the ribs, Will. They didn't deserve that. If we were still coming off the Pruitt era, Tennessee would deserve that. Not anymore.
Sampson was the touchdown scorer. That's a fact. That dude had a nose for the end zone.
For sure. This is ultimately, though, just a bad situation all around. And it's a shame that it played out this way. But Tennessee just became a much more interesting team to talk about this year. Definitely say that. Yeah.
Why can't they be normal? It's so funny. Like everything was it's like, it's all going to make sense. We got it. We got our quarterback. We already had the guy who didn't make sense work out in Hooker. Joe Milton, he's going to make sense. It's like the least logical thing. That's why this coach is so perfect for Tennessee, because just when you think you have him figured out, It's like, actually, we're a ground and pound team. We're like Notre Dame in the 40s, and we're going to run all over you. And then our quarterback's going to leave. And then what are we going to do? Find out next time, the next episode of Dragon Ball Z.
I'll tell you what, if Josh Heupel gets through this year just with a ho-hum 8-4, and he is able to withstand all of this and just not be a laughingstock this year. And I'm not saying Tennessee's going to be a laughingstock, but if this is the most drama that Tennessee endures this year, which it very well could be, and they just have a standard 8-4 year, maybe they win one of those games that they're not supposed to or something like that. Josh Heupel, we need to just start annually throwing wild scenarios at him and just seeing what he can do in the most mundane, like, drama-free way.
Because Connor, he already has that season. The 2021 season was the best 7-win season in Tennessee history. Now they're going to have the best 8 or 9-win season in Tennessee history because he's going to have to do it again. I actually am starting to feel bad for him because all of this stuff, he didn't, put the cash in the McDonald's bags. He didn't make Nico go back and renegotiate. He's just coaching football. He found a way to make this offense work despite the horrors, and yet he's right back where he started.
Yeah. How about that? Wild story that has played out in the SEC, and who knows, maybe it's going to be playing out elsewhere as we dig into the post-spring transfer portal window. All right, let's kick it to Manny Diaz. I'd never chatted with Manny before, but this conversation was a week and a half ago, so that's why I didn't have any sort of Nico-specific questions about the state of college football with a move like that. Obviously, if the timing had lined up, we would have been discussing that, kind of what it means, but awesome stuff with someone who I've really grown to respect. Also, I cold take myself hard at the start of this interview, which you will see in a few seconds. So here is Manny Diaz. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Duke coach Manny Diaz. Manny, we're recording this before the Final Four, but this interview is going to come out after the Final Four. So I'll just instead ask you this. How awesome was the championship parade?
It's been fun to watch a group of guys, especially as young as they are, to play as hard and be unselfish and dedicated to defense. As a defensive guy, got to tip my hat to that.
I know you can hoop a bit. Have you played pickup hoops with John Shire? Because I'll just say from personal experience, as someone who grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and witnessed his own brother allow 32 points to that guy in a playoff game, I would advise against any scenario in which you could be against him.
Oh, not on the court with John. Luckily or unluckily, our football off seasons and our basketball off seasons don't really match really well for recreational reasons. So when the football group gets into Cameron, it's normally a slugfest. I don't think John would even want to get into that game.
Yeah, as it should be. That's just that's the way that football players should be playing hoops. Let's talk about your team. 9 wins in year one is really no small feat in the portal era, especially with all the roster turnover that a lot of these teams have to endure. You led Duke to its first ever win against your alma mater, Florida State. You've been doing this for almost 3 decades now. I know it didn't end the way that you wanted, but how rewarding of a season was this for you, just in your entire, comparison to your entire career?
It was as rewarding as any season I've ever had. I had maybe as much fun coaching that team as I've ever had. You begin to learn the superpower of the guys here at Duke, what makes them special. And they want to be coached, and they want to be driven. They want to understand the ins and outs. They want to know the details, and they want to be held accountable. And all those things, I think now, more than ever, are really important in this portal era, where you end up running against some teams that play like a bunch of strangers or independent contractors. And I felt like we had a really good team. And even the way that it ended didn't bother me. You never like getting beat, but it was a great lesson in terms of, if our next step of getting, Ole Miss by every metric was a playoff team, really shouldn't have had the losses that they had. Their roster was a playoff roster. And so to go against them and to see where we're not quite there yet was a good lesson for us. We don't shy from that. We learn from that.
Really hard for us in the media to kind of figure out year one coaches because everybody inherits a different situation. The situation you inherited from Mike Elko, did that give you a head start because of what he was able to do in a short matter of time? Or is that kind of out the window with how quickly you look at the portal and you see some of the pieces that you obviously have to be able to replace? Like what was that dynamic like in year one, knowing that he did a lot of really good things during his 2 years in Durham?
Right. Both. Right. I mean, I think one at least set the expectation that you could win, and there was an expectation to win. I think the key is that David Feely, our strength coach, staying. So I really think he was the secret sauce to the success of both programs. But we also inherited a team that lost a lot of older players. Our quarterback had gone to Notre Dame. Many of our top line guys had transferred out to school. So, when we got here in that first December, the narrative was really who had left, and we had to shift it into who was here and who had stayed, and the belief that we would win with those who had stayed, because we'd been picked clean pretty good.
Malik Murphy, him entering the portal after the year that you guys had, it surprised a lot of people because he was a really solid player. And, I think after coming over from Texas, that was one of those areas that you talk about like replacing, and you guys hit on that. You guys are then very quickly able to land Darian Mensah out of the portal, who was pretty coveted after the year that he had at Tulane as a freshman. From your perspective, what kind of went into that whole process?
Well, one, we're really thankful for Malik in terms of coming here at that time in December when there was a lot of uncertainty with Duke, and we don't win 9 games without him, without a doubt. But things move fast now, as you mentioned, in the portal. Hopefully the calendar changes. That's a whole nother conversation where we can come to grips more. We're not dealing with this type of stuff in December. But when Darian Mensah, became available, and you do your quick eval and find out what type of player he is, just felt like it'd be a great match for us here at Duke. And since he's been on our campus, that's absolutely proven to be the case.
How long is the eval with that when you're like, look, this is a huge decision that we've got to make, and this guy could make or break our season? We're not talking about, hey, maybe this is going to impact one win. No, this could determine, are we talking 4 or 5 wins? Are we talking like 8, 9 wins?
Yeah.
What's that eval process like for you, and how much, prep do you have to do just to be able to figure out if this guy's right?
It's huge. You just got to get through all the film, and you're going to watch the good parts first, and then you got to watch the games and see the not as good parts, and get an idea of what it is that you're looking for, and his production for being a first year starter was uncanny. But then, maybe some things that we were lacking with the ability to create, to extend plays, keep eyes down the field, and make us, make the defense defend 2 plays, I thought would give us an element that we really didn't have.
My breakdown of him was I thought he would have been really a nice fit at a lot of different places. And, you look at freshmen, and are they going to break down when pressure kind of, gets in their face? What are the throws that they're making under pressure? And he really did a lot of things that you wouldn't expect of a true freshman. And maybe, that's part of the eval moving forward, is saying like, hey, we got to let it rip at some of these instances as well. What was the thing that you saw from him on film that made you say, that's our guy? Was it like, is there a specific throw even that kind of stands out that made you think this guy's going to look really good in a Duke uniform?
I don't know about one particular play. I mean, certainly you watch him very early in his career get, thrown in there at Norman, against Oklahoma. But I'm with you. To me, it was just when it's not there, right? I'm a defensive guy. I've spent my whole career getting quarterbacks off the first look, right? And trying to take away what they want to do and see what they do after that. And most college quarterbacks, once you do that, their level of play goes way, way down. And Darian seemed the guy that despite his young age, you could never sort of rattle, stay poised, kept his eyes down the field, and could either scramble for first downs or buy time to throw for first downs. And in this era, that's so crucial, because otherwise you almost be, perfect in your play calling and your ball placement if you don't have that ability.
Is there anybody that comes to mind as a comp for him? I don't know if you're big on comps. Nick Saban, whenever I made the mistake one time of throwing out a comp to him, and he just like immediately, no, we don't compare guys to somebody else. So feel free to shoot that down. But is there somebody that kind of comes to mind with Mensah?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't want to get into all that. But the one other part that I'll mention is just in terms of, then when we found out that there was an interest, which I do think speaks to the power of Duke and what, we were able to put on film last year in terms of a style of play, the total package of what we, offer on campus and what you can do here from a football standpoint. And then we got to learn who Darian was, the person, and we tracked a unique guy here at Duke, right? And we really felt like he would fit in with our locker room, and that's exactly what has been proven to be true.
What should we be doing with spring as it relates to the calendar, with spring football, with the portal, with all this stuff, spring games? Like, how should we be going about this? Well, if you were, sitting here with the power as commissioner of college football, position that'll never really exist, but if you had that kind of power, what would you do?
Yeah, I've been sort of stumbling for this the last couple of years. We don't have to invent it. I mean, the NFL has already figured it out, right? If you make spring the time for player movement and then make, early summer the time for development, right? The calendar's already been laid out, right? They don't have practices before the draft. They don't have practices before free agency, and so our whole issue is the angst of getting the transfers to get there mid-year, which, by the way, creates a non-level playing field because people start school at different times in January. People have different drop ad dates, you know what I mean, in terms of when they can admit a player into school. So you're creating an unlevel playing field for this whole idea to get there for these 15 practices. And as I mentioned a year ago, we won 9 games, and our 15 practices a year ago, we only had 5 offensive linemen, right? I mean, a third of our starters last year weren't on our campus for spring. So what's the point of spring? Why don't we go to the OTA minicamp schedule in May after you get everybody here? I don't think there's anything wrong with having a student athlete with the movement that they are allowed now to have to stay for a fall and a spring at whatever school they're at. I just don't think that's a bad thing academically. I don't think it's bad for anybody. And it just takes the angst. It's hard on these admission departments to get these guys admitted in short order at the turn. And it just moves the movement into a more sensible time of year. Again, much like the NFL does.
Would the portal be 9 days then? Because that's what it's set for right now for the spring, April 16th, 25th.
Right. But everybody's like, that doesn't mean anything. The portal can be 9 minutes. Right. First of all, everybody's, whether you're going in or you're not going in. So there's nothing happening on the 7th or 8th day. And until we get, something going on with the, the players usually are making that decision before it opens anyhow. So I think there's a myth that the length of portal, I think initially it was a 45-day window and then turned to 30 and then went to 15. Like I said, it could be 9 minutes and you would still have the same movement as we have now.
I do want to get your perspective on your journey into coaching because it's very unique. You were working alongside friend of the show, Ryan McGee, as a production assistant at ESPN. You didn't play college football, but you decide one day, I'm going to leave Bristol. I'm going to go become a college football coach. And I got to imagine there were at least one of those aha moments for you. What was that place in time in which you said, I think I can do this?
After I made the move?
You mean, maybe what kind of prompts a move like that? Because it's one thing if you were a player in college or something like that, you're doing the office thing. You're like, all right, I think I got some more football in me. But to be in that spot where you're cutting up highlights and you're doing something that is definitely outside of that typical realm. But was there a moment when you're at ESPN and you're like, I think my calling is to be a college football coach?
At the end of the 96 NFL season, in January of 97, the Super Bowl was in New Orleans. It was Brett Favre and the Green Bay Packers against the New England Patriots, who at that time were coached by Bill Parcells. And we spent a week down there prepping for the game. And I went along. Tom Jackson, the old Broncos linebacker, been on ESPN forever, had a good relationship with Parcells. And we were doing an interview, and I went along for the interview, and I was sitting in the room. And on one side, you see a man who's, just coached this franchise to a Super Bowl, and obviously it had already won one with New York. And on the other side, you have Tom Jackson and the ESPN producer and the ESPN On Air and all these other ESPN people. And that was kind of the pivotal moment where you get to look at both sides of the room. And as the interview was going on, my brain was not, thinking as a journalist, like, wow, I wonder what the next question I'd ask Bill Parcells was. I was enamored with what Bill Parcells was saying and wanted to, I just found my mind being pulled to that side of the room as opposed. So it was a really weird, when you talk about an aha moment, it was quite a moment to see two people, right? If you're at ESPN interviewing the Super Bowl, participant head coach, you've made it, like, right. When you made it, you're at the top of your food chain. And certainly if you're coaching the NFL at the Super Bowl, you've done the same. So you see these two sort of professions meet at the top of the mountain. And there's only one thing I want to do. And from that point on, it was all about, okay, how do I go be that? It wasn't about being a college head coach. I just knew I just had to get on that path. At that moment, I just felt like I was on the wrong path.
How much did you know about football at that point? From an X's and O's standpoint, was that something that you really had to pick up on and get those reps, or were you like pretty well versed in it when you were, even in high school?
I knew tons. I know so much I didn't realize what I didn't know, right? I knew enough to be dangerous, but luckily, again, when I was at ESPN, I mentioned Tom Jackson. Yeah, I was really pivotal with Sterling Sharp. I'm really fired up going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Sterling was there at that time, and we would talk ball at all the times. And like I said, looking back now, it's comical at the infinite amount of that I actually did know, but you just knew enough to make yourself useful. And then look, from that point on, if you're getting into any profession, it's going to be about your work ethic, right? Like FedEx is not going to hire somebody at the entry level to try to give them an idea on how to ship boxes. Like, right? FedEx has kind of figured that out, right? They just want someone that's dependable and works hard. And then, one day, they're going to ask you your opinion. And that's really what ended up being true, whether I was working in TV or working in football, right? The first thing was, can you just be dependable when we give you small jobs? And then the more small jobs you do well, then we'll give you bigger jobs. And that's really just, all that's happened in the last 25 or so years.
I always think that if anybody gets to a place of success, there's at least one person along the way that gave them a job that they probably weren't qualified for. At some point, I imagine you had an experience like that where you thought, I just got a job that there were probably more qualified candidates than me. Who was the person that gave you that opportunity?
Yeah, really, for me, it's Chuck Amato. Chuck was the assistant head coach at Florida State under Bobby Bowden, and he really handled the day-to-day. And after I volunteered there for a year, a job came up on defense. It was called the defensive cinematographer role. And, back then there were so few jobs. I mean, there were there was Coach Bowden, 9 on the field coaches. There were 2 GAs and 2 cinematographers. That's the whole staff. There were 14 people on the coaching staff. Now you've got, college staffs that have, 50, 60, 70 people. There was 14. And so one of those 14 jobs came open. You can only imagine how many people would want to be one of 14 at Florida State in the late 90s when they were just rolling. And for me, again, how did I get it? Because I had been walking the hallways and they didn't want to, deal with a bunch of resumes, and they seemed like I was, dependable and not a, ex murderer. And so it's really just how I got it. So was I qualified to get it? Depends on what certainly from a football standpoint, there have been a million that would have been more, but in terms of a dependability standpoint, I had the ability to prove that.
I know you've gotten a million better jobs since then, but defensive cinematographer is the single best title you've had at any time. That's awesome.
Yeah, and never graced a business card, but I was proud of it at the time. So
I would still have that at the top of the resume. Defensive cinematographer at one point. That's absolutely awesome. I'll give you the option here. Favorite story from your experience, either with Dan Mullen or Mark Richt?
Oh gosh, so I've been so lucky to work with so many phenomenal head coaches, and Dan and Mark have been 2 great ones. Dan came, Dan came at a great time in my life because I had worked in the Florida State Bobby Bowden model for really the first 12 or 13 years of my career. That had been Coach Bowden, Amato at NC State, and then Rick Stockstill at Middle Tennessee for 4 years, really all descendants of Coach Bowden. And then you jump into it with Dan Mullen, and Dan was straight 2 years removed from Urban Meyer. And so it was like, I mean, you want to talk about whiplash from one extreme to another. And the one funny Dan Mullen story I'll tell you is it was our first spring game. And spring games, we're talking about spring football and whatnot. Spring games were a very sensitive topic at Mississippi State because I think one of them a year, couple 2 before, maybe when Kroom was head coach, ended 0-0. Right. And the one thing fans don't want is they don't want to see a 0-0 spring game. Now, the year that we won the Natty at Florida State in '99, that spring game final score was 3-0. And the fans did boo us off the field. So, but they won 0-0. So there was one rule that, we only had 4 defenses we could call. And by the way, if he kind of wanted a complimentary defense to a good play call, you would kind of get the wink like, hey, call defense number 2. But the one rule is that on field goal block, there was no rush, right? So lo and behold, like the first drive, the offense drives down the field, right? And it's a field goal, not of any great length, right? And so we're like, hey, there's no rush. And I think Fletcher Cox was one of our defensive tackles. Josh Boyd was the other one. And so we're like, literally just stand there, right? So the ball snapped, and this is on ESPN something, right? ESPN 2, ESPN who knows what. The ball snapped, hold goes down, the guy kicks. And one of the D-tackles, might have been Fletcher for all I know, just does this. I mean, no one rushes. They're just literally just standing there. And he just does this and puts his hand up, right? Doink, and the ball hits it, right? Dan Mullen got nose to nose with me. And of all the words that I could think of that were said, none were missed. Every word that you could imagine, all were said. It was phenomenal. And all I'm thinking is, what have I gotten myself into? And so like the next play, so we actually put the ball back down to kick it again. And it was like, guys, like hands on your knee. It It was so comical. So yeah, that was a great introduction to my first spring there at Mississippi State.
Oh gosh, yeah, that'll get the heart rate pumping real quick on a job like that. Oh
That's
gosh.
right.
What did you take away from your exit at Miami? What's the thing that kind of sticks with you from that experience?
There was such learning. I mean, just from year one, and all the mistakes you make your first year as a head coach, because there's just nothing, you think you have an idea of what it's like and you just don't, right? Um, you're always trying to learn how to get your staff as good as you can get it. Um, Year two, you think you've made some adjustments and you've done some things right. Oh, bang, here comes COVID, right? So that's an education, and whatever you think every day, you're not going to have it. Um, and that team actually ended up being, won 7 games in the ACC, right? And had we had played our, schedule that was laid out before the season, I'm fairly certain that's a 10-win football team. But you don't, and you don't finish that year very well. And then you go into year 3 and you're under pressure. And then our starting quarterback gets hurt in the first month, and 2 of our top 3 running backs, and you're really, really up against it. We miss a 20-something yard field goal off the post to lose our ACC opener. So you're really up against it. But then to have, a team with all that negativity around it to win 5 out of its last 6, and the one at law that you lose on a 4th and 14. What you really see is you saw that you had something good going. You had the hearts and minds of the players captured. You had a team that continued to fight hard for each other. So you had a sense that if you had the opportunity to do it again, you knew better what to expect, right? And you knew more how to do it, but you also had some proven. My 3 years in Miami, we had the second most wins in the ACC in that time frame. So in no way did we accomplish what we should have accomplished, and I'm ultimately accountable for all that. But you also had the idea that, you know what, I can do this thing. But then last thing I'll say on that, but then you had to be really aware of where you would attempt to do it again, because you realize that these jobs and that you get, there's a lot more to it than just who they stick in the head coach seat. There's a lot of things around you that either prime you for success or the opposite, and you've got to have great alignment. You got to have a place of shared values, and you have to have a place where the support matches the expectations. Because if the expectations are greater than the support, there's always going to be angst, and there's a lot of that going around in this sport right now.
I think a lot of people pointed that right after that happened at Miami too, and that alignment just wasn't necessarily where it needed to be, and something that there's lessons to be learned across college football. I know you got to run, you got a million things going on. I want to get you out of here with some rapid fire, just 5 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Does that work for you?
Of course.
All right, first one. What is your go-to in-flight entertainment?
Oh gosh, you know what? Silly video games. My son's got me like into all like obviously like the retro. There's like every sport, like retro soccer, golf, baseball, whatever. Just mindless. Just sit there and just plug away at taking a Premier League team to the title, something like that. So yep, just good way to kill the time.
I like that. How many cups of coffee per day are you at right now?
I am usually 2 or 3 before the morning, and then that's the last caffeine I have for the rest of the day.
That's low. That's pretty low for a college ball coach. That's definitely on the lower end.
I would worry. One, I wouldn't sleep if I had it after lunch, and I don't need much more energy juice than that.
True. What's the best advice you've ever received in your coaching career?
Oh gosh, I think you have to be authentic to yourself. I'll go back to Sterling. Even when I was at ESPN, he would say it's an insecure profession because it's filled with insecure people. And more often than not, I think it's a book title, Ryan Holiday. The ego is the enemy, right? It is, and the ego is what gets in the way of most coaches from, and we all fight that battle. And at some point you're going to go through it. If you think you haven't gone through it, it's coming. And if you haven't think you've gone through it, you probably did, and you're not aware of it. But yeah, I think those 2 things are vastly crucial.
Who's the single most difficult player that you've ever had to game plan against?
The first one that comes to mind is RG3. At that time, the Baylor offense and the choice passing game was new, and they had guys that ran 4.4, 4.3 at all 3 receiver positions, and then had a 245-pound back that could run downhill behind a very strong offensive line. And if you manage to cover all those guys, then you had to deal with his feet, as a scrambler and a quarterback runner. So anytime the quarterback can run, it obviously creates another issue for the defense. But that element of, the ability to throw the deep ball to elite receivers on the outside and then to extend plays with your legs, that was really, really difficult offense to stop. There's been other great quarterbacks that we've gone against, but he just, in terms of all the things that he could, throw at you, was really problematic.
I thought for sure Cam was going to be the response there.
No, it's actually funny, as I was finishing up, Cam Ward had a very similar, the game has changed a little bit, you know what I mean? But yeah, certainly he was as good as advertised this year and about to be picked very soon.
Both Cam Ward, Cam Newton. Yeah, same thing. Same sort of deal with them.
Oh, Cam Newton.
Yeah, that's who I was originally thinking of, Mississippi State.
It's funny. We held Cam Newton to like 17. We played him really, really well that year. The rule with Cam Newton was you weren't allowed to look at him during pregame warmups because your players would be so discouraged. The guy looked like literally like a Greek god. It was insane.
I asked this because Ryan McGee made me aware of it. He grew up in North Carolina. He was told by SEC people that North Carolina wasn't in the South. Is North Carolina in the South?
Who said that? SEC people?
Ryan McGee was told that by SEC people because he's like, I'm from North Carolina. And they're like, you're not from the South. And he's like, then why do I talk like this?
No, if Ryan McGee would be, he'd be the first person as Exhibit A as a Southerner, right? Therefore, North Carolina must be in the South. And if you think about NASCAR and its roots here in this state, and then if you just go north and ask anybody if North Carolina's in the South, you're going to get a definitive yes. So I'm gonna go with a strong yes on that one.
Agreed. Manny, really appreciate it. Always been a fan. Wish you the best of luck this season.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Will, let's close with some lad of the week. You want to start us off?
Yes, I'm going to go kind of like, the understood you. It's the quarterback that we understood was never going to transfer. That's going to be Gunnar Stockton. It's going to be Ty Simpson. Now, they might transfer in the future, but I'm talking about this moment right now, like this ongoing season. Guys that have stuck by an incumbent starter, not hit the portal, not hired an agent, not gotten their dads in the media.
Oh, we don't know if they might have an agent.
No, but in terms of like a PR agent, you know what I'm saying? A guy who is managing their like exit. But yeah, I think football players that want to play football, I think are pretty cool. And I think that's back in the day kind of an expectation, but right now it'll set you apart. So if you're one of those SEC teams that has an incumbent guy who you feel really good about, feel extra good today, but it could be you tomorrow. We just never know.
What if I told you Gunnar Stockton has entered the... No, I'm kidding. We're not doing that. I did look this up, though, just to make sure that you didn't get cold taked in 2 seconds. That would have been incredible. We would have had to leave that in.
Oh, yeah, but the difference is I would go to the store and I would see 4 billboards. It would be Kirby would put in that call. That wouldn't leave the building, buddy.
That's true. That's very, very true. I think there will be a lot of fans across college football appreciating a guy that stayed.
I got another guy for you, Cutter. Jalen Milroe. They're dumping on Jalen Milroe right now, but he stayed and he stuck it out. That's why I've always liked Jalen Milroe, because he had a big smile on his face. He didn't blame his coaches, and he's going to the NFL now without dirty laundry that could have been everywhere. That's never happened for Alabama. He was the one guy who could have done that. Fans have been mad at him, but I love a guy like that.
I like Jalen Milroe a lot too.
Yep.
What did he have to endure to stay?
I mean, remember, he did it a couple of times. So we talked about O'Brien thinking he was a defensive back. He had the ability to hit the portal a couple of times to go, like I said, spread Alabama's laundry, go play at a mid-tier Power 5 school, whatever. And he just was professional. I think it's hard to find today.
But yeah, that would be my question is when would it have made sense for him to go? Because by the time he was being able to step into that starting role post Bryce Young, we're talking about a guy who was still considered the leader in the clubhouse.
But I mean, when Nick Saban left, would have been an easy time. That would have been the easiest time in the world.
Yeah, it would have. You're right. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's probably that is probably a fair point.
How many guys have stayed through a coach leaving like that? That's the other part of it. That used to happen back in the day.
Would he have been better off if he had transferred?
That's kind of the question. Is like, we see this version of Alabama, we see this version of Milroe. We don't know if Alabama would have been worse, and we don't know if Milroe would have been better. And that's what I always say is, like, if you put him in like a run like a system that can utilize him, maybe put him at Tennessee, see how that goes.
Would have been interesting. All right, yeah. I'm back to giving Jalen Milroe credit. You're right. He stayed. I'm going with the obvious one, Rory McIlroy.
Mm-hmm.
Finally getting over the hump, getting that green jacket. Great sports moment. Just an unbelievable sports moment that I think anybody can appreciate. Seeing the look on his face afterwards, knowing that even in that final round, to have several different instances in which, like, oh my God, this is Greg Norman all over again. What are we watching here? This is painful. How can this guy not get it done? He's got a 4-shot lead here, and he's going to blow it, in 2 holes. And seeing that just release of emotion from a guy that had to hear it all was pretty cool. It was really cool, because there are a lot of times in sports when we don't see that person, that team get over the hump. I was thinking about what it probably had to feel like for Georgia fans to finally feel like it's our time. And now, in the words of one Billy Madison, now you're all in big trouble.
Yeah.
Matt Berry tweeted that. Friend of the show, Matt Berry, not fantasy football Matt Berry. And I kind of had a similar thought with Rory of what if this is just going to unlock this 10 years of him winning 3 Masters, and he and Scotty Scheffler just go back and forth or something like that. But yeah, couldn't help but feel good for that guy. I know there's a lot of people that are kind of out on Rory, but he's definitely got an aura about him. When the Arnold Palmer was here 3 years ago, it's here every year. I shouldn't say it like that. But I went 3 years ago with my brother, and you kind of get your choice of who you're going to follow around for the day. And we decided we were going to follow Rory. And following Rory for probably we do 9-10 holes or something like that. The amount of people that are so close to that dude at all times, even in non-major events, it's kind of hard to process until you actually see it. You know what I mean? And obviously when he's leading at the Masters, the amount of pressure, the weight of the world on him, I can't begin to imagine what goes through his head and how he regrouped after missing that putt on 18. It's the stuff of legend. It truly, truly is. So happy for Rory, happy that he was able to get over the hump and, provide every sports fan just a moment that I think if you're watching that, you're like, this is very, very special to witness, and you can tell how special it is.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me, one of those guys that feel like they were of, our childhoods or of a different time, go on to have kind of the greatest success right now, because it's like exactly your point. It's like all of the feelings that we had were based around a version of him that no longer exists in the game of golf, that doesn't exist in the same way that it did. And it's kind of funny to look up and be like, this is kind of the veteran here, the guy that's paid his dues or whatever. So it's really cool to see that. And yeah, I think golf is probably more accessible than it's been. I know it saw a big climb during COVID and everything. So yeah, it's pretty cool for him to see his mountain right now because he stayed at it.
A lot better than watching Patrick Reed win.
I
don't think I'm breaking any news by saying that.
Yeah, it just feels icky coming over. Yeah, it's like Patrick Reed.
No, thank you. A reminder: today's pod was brought to you by Dabble. Again, $25 in bonus cash with that promo code SDS2. They'll get you set up, all things daily fantasy. They have you absolutely covered for what's going to be a very fun couple of months in sports, NBA playoffs getting going here. A little bit of housekeeping, Will. We have a lot of moving schedules coming up. We have some traveling things that we're going to be working around. So next week, our pod will drop on Tuesday. We're going to be recording that on Monday. I'm sure we'll be previewing the NFL draft. We'll wait and see kind of what shakes out with this post-spring portal window, which opens this Wednesday. And so I'm sure there'll be some stuff related to that as well. So we might have the next couple weeks, Tuesday pods dropping. So we're a bit off of our normal schedule, but wanted to let the people know. And hopefully, many appreciated the fact that we didn't wait until Wednesday to sit here and record a pod about you. Please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Set Down South, at CJ Guerra, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. See you soon.